Welcome back to Citizen Weekend. This is the last Citizen Weekend of the year, so we thought, why not do a review of the top stories of the year? Kenyans may have thought that after weathering 2 elections in 1 year, 2018 couldn't come close to being an eventful year as its predecessor. But 2018 came and is almost gone with political twists, pinnacle sports events, and soaring opportunities. I have a very able panel here with me as we discuss the 2018 highlights. To my far right is Kelly Murungi. She's a senior consultant and business coach at Lattice, as well as a social commentator. Closest to me is Chris Kirwa, events guru and COO at Kate Chris Limited. And last but not least is David Osiany, a political analyst, very familiar face here at Citizen. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with the beginning of the year. We didn't think this would happen, but it did. The NASA oath. Raila Odinga took oath to become the people's president at Uhuru Park. And of course, he had the Bible there and he did his version of the oath. And he had Miguna there and Ruaka MP TJ Kajwang. And it was a huge hullabaloo because, of course, the government said this is a treasonous act and you can be arrested. When you saw this, Kelly, what was going through your mind?
So I didn't think there was much to it in terms of constitutionality. Right. But I felt after the kind of year we had with a disappointing, second election where he didn't participate, the people needed something. Especially the youthful supporters needed something to anchor on. And this swearing in then served as that. But what was disappointing then was, we were all waiting, what happens? So this movement, what will it do, for the young people? And that happened as it did. But I think the ceremony in itself was needed, because otherwise then people would, the supporters would wonder, then what,
And it was interesting because his other co-principals were missing. They skipped the event, Wetangula, Musalia, and Kalonzo. And people wondered, what is that about? When you witnessed all of this, Chris, what were you also kind of trying to decipher from it?
From the events perspective, it was interesting in the sense that I think this was one of the most watched events. You could classify it alongside watching of the Olympics or an award ceremony. And for us in the events industry, we were worried, extremely worried, because now we didn't know what's going to happen after this. For some of us who are actually supplying at that event, even them, they were actually worried. You're seated at this event and you're thinking, so yes, so this guy now he's the people's president, but we have the other president on the other side. What next? Already the year was already bad for the events industry. So I think everybody watched that event. It's those ones you watch and you do not want to leave, listening carefully to what everybody is saying. And the missing of the other core principles now compounded everything. So now you don't know whether, okay, now he's alone, now the rest of the principles are not around. So what exactly is happening? So I think it was a moment of confusion, moment of not knowing now where we are going as a country. Absolutely.
And of course, we saw Raila change his Twitter bio to President of the Republic of Kenya, and people felt, okay, this is official, but what does this mean moving forward? And it was aired live. Citizen was cut off mid-morning during that transmission, which was really the beginning of the media shut-off.
Yes.
But David, you, of course, as many other Kenyans, were watching keenly.
Yeah. Well, I am a student of literature, and one of the objects of literature that I take keen interest in that played out that day is the object of symbolism. Raila decided that this may not be constitutional, but he knew it would be symbolic. A symbol of defiance, that he felt aggrieved in the previous election and he wasn't going to let it go down. He was throwing salvos and making it very clear that I am going to run a parallel government. At least I will create a legitimacy crisis. Right. And it is that crisis that would, later lead on to the good things we may see today or we saw last week. So that was a very weird moment. I can understand how weird it was for you know, Kalonzo Musyoka, who was finding this opposition thing very new from 2013, unlike Raila, who is, you know, battle-hardened opposition leader, trenches man, who had no qualms going and saying, tell you what, I'm going to be sworn in, I'll deal with the ramifications of that. Later on, they would say, no, we were waiting for a phone call from a Nigerian line and the works. So the truth we will read in their autobiographies. But one of the lowest moments for the country, in terms of its ever-progressing democratic self, was when we had a media shutdown. I never envisaged a situation where and when we would get that base. We'd never gotten baser than that. And so I am happy we are back on our feet trying to get there, but there needs to be a reassurance that we will never go back to that moment. We will never have a situation that ought to necessitate it. And that even if we did, the leadership of the country at the time will never find it necessary to muzzle the media.
No, absolutely. And one of the ramifications that you were talking about that came after that was Miguna's deportation. Very, very dramatic. Citizen happened to get that footage. Jeff Koinange was on the flight. And this was not planned. It was very, very coincidental. And seeing, you know, Miguna being brought, frog-marched to the flight, the Emirates flight that was taking him back to Canada. And the government justifying it by saying he's a Canadian citizen. He did not reapply for his Kenyan citizenship, so and revoked his passport, and it was a whole hullabaloo, and people wondering how could this happen. Kelly, your take?
So I think that was unnecessary on the government side, and it made the government look bad, because I mean Miguna had run for office legitimately and had been approved. So a rational government would have done, you know, the due diligence necessary to allow him to run as a Kenyan citizen, and it was a flex, a muscle flex. That honestly, I mean, when you think about it, was totally unnecessary, needless, in my opinion, made the government look bad, especially when we're talking about, you know, respect for human rights, but also just basic human decency. Because the footage that made it even across international media showed him looking dragged, you know, being dragged into a plane, and it really, you know, you want to have a real basis. If you're gonna make an example of somebody, you want to actually have information that can be verified and you can stand behind. But I think the fact that the government looked bad either way, either by deporting him or even giving the reasons for deporting him. Yeah, so I think it was an egoistic moment for the government, which doesn't look good if you have legitimately won an election.
Well, the tides have turned in Miguna's favor now. The court found Miguna's rights were violated. He should be paid 7 million shillings, passport returned, and so he will be boarding this time as he comes back to Kenya.
To get the money.
But to get that money and his passport as well, Chris. But I mean, do you find that that is enough to kind of salvage what we witnessed earlier this year?
I think what happened is when that altercation was happening at, and of course Jeff was busy trying to live stream it and you guys were live, I think every other Kenyan must have gone and picked their passport or travel document and decided, okay, I think I need to understand this document properly and what the government can do when they decide to flex their muscles, and am I protected? So I remember a friend of mine actually calling his legal team and asking them, wait a minute, I need you to give me an insight into this. You mean this can really happen? So I think it was good you are alive then. You are not shut down by then. So a lot of people were watching and now beginning to research more and to know you can't take for granted this document and your rights to it. Yes.
And in the same month of March, the handshake. A total about turn from what we witnessed in 2017 and then January with the oath. And all of a sudden you see Raila and Uhuru shaking hands in front of Harambee House and people say, okay, so all is well with the world. And we forget everything that happened. David, and we talked about this even on Friday. Was it enough to really heal the rifts between the two political divides in this country?
Well, I tell you, the country was at its lowest moment then. The ethnic, political tensions were obvious, and you know, the palpitations were real. there was anger on each side. The country was divided right in half. One half saying, we know that there is a sworn-in president, but we do not care. We will owe our allegiance to Opoda Farm or to, you know, Kisumu, whichever it is. We will owe our allegiance there. And the other side of the country saying, we do not care whatever you have to say. We have moved on, be it as it may. Now, of course, the ruling of the judiciary then, you know, would hit on the legitimacy of the process of electing the president. But at that time, the country suffered economically so badly. You know, no one was able to predict the goings-on in the country. None of us, not the people in business, not, you know, the policy people would be able to tell you that this is the forecast of this country in terms of growth for the for its GDP and many other things. Yeah. We were stagnated. Then the handshake happened. Interestingly, no one even remotely guessed that it would happen, which speaks to why I have said time upon number. When I see people juggling about 2022, I tell them, politics, a day is so long.
Yes.
In 20 minutes of that greeting in Harambee House and that doorstep address, the political landscape changed for good. And it was the best thing that happened to this country. Best because it happened between two of the worst antagonists at the time. And I hope that that handshake is just not cosmetic. And that beyond the handshake and the wonderful trip by the president to the lakeside city, we are going to have real, properly put down and lay down frameworks to achieve cohesion and avoid reversal of the gains made by the handshake.
Now, to something, an event that you wanted to add something to that, Chris, really quickly?
Yes, I think we can recall, I think a church function where Raila was called by Uhuru, and he said this. He said, when things are so hot, me and Uhuru talk. Yeah. And for me, that was an insight that irrespective of what happens, there must be time and a line between these two guys that they can actually call each other. And they actually can do what they did. So I think the hardliners within each side of the political divide need to learn from that. You don't need to be so hard on your neighbor. Because like you said, in 20 minutes, people can shake hands.
And
then it leaves you irrelevant.
I just want to make an observation on the effect of the handshake on the opposition, because it has felt like we don't really have an opposition, and we know that in a democracy, the opposition checks the government. And by the two of them shaking hands, we've seen, you know, opposition MPs, opposition governors also realigning, and so it's almost as if, as a non-political type, it feels like we have another coalition government where we really don't know who is checking the other. And then secondly, I think what worried me about the handshake is it made it clear that our politics is really about, you know, the guys at the top, because during after the election was nullified, we had some violence, we had loss of lives, we had the president coming out and congratulating the police, you know, for doing a good job, and then the handshake happened and all was fixed. So that worries me, especially with the history we've had as a country. And like David says, I mean, you hope that these will translate to something where the person on the ground actually sees the fruits of the handshake, but also feels that sense of belonging. Because I don't think by shaking hands, the people who lost their lives, their families, are happy. It's just, you know, let's move on. But, you know, we just wait and see.
But just a ride on that. I actually agree with Kelly. We need to move gradually and, you know, permanently away from personality politics to ideology politics, so that every political leader, be it an MCA or an MP or women rep, whatever it is, will be able to explain, what's my ideology? What do I stand for? Am I a social democrat? Am I a liberal? What do I mean by being a liberal? What others can we coin in our local context so that we explain to people how we ideologically lean? But that said, I also hope that the handshake decisively deals with the IEBC to make it a trustworthy institution. That is the only way we are able to achieve an effective opposition, because then we will have an opposition that agrees that we got into a contest and we fairly lost the election, and for the first time probably have concession speeches of people saying, I ran for this office, I genuinely lost in this election, and so I take over my mantle as minority in Parliament, and I will do that duty honorably. Until and unless that is achieved, we will continue with the push and pull. Even if we were to have a new constitution that factors in all these other ethnic groups and gives them opportunity, we will not be able to move forward or stop these divisions unless and until we decisively deal with IEBC and ensure that it has a trust of all the actors, both the voter and the voted for.
I mean, the fact that we still talk about the handshake politics towards the end of the year, and this happened much, much earlier in 2018, shows how politically inclined we are as a society, that even bigger events like the Solai Dam tragedy that happened, we forget 47 people dead, 190 million liters of water just gushing out of this earthen dam. Really quickly, I want to get your thoughts on this before we wrap up. Kelly.
So actually, you know, I've kept thinking about that tragedy, and like you said, we moved on. And we had some talk of compensation. Yeah. But what worried me the most about that is it feels like we move on very fast. Very fast. You know, 47 is not a small number. When you think in the context of a nation like us, we're not a big nation. But also the fact that no one has been held responsible, and it doesn't seem like anyone will be held responsible for it. And we, as usual, and as we've seen with demolition, there's this push and pull where the authorizing bodies say we didn't authorize this, and the inspecting bodies say they were authorized, and the person responsible says it's not me. These things happen, and I feel like we have a dangerous attitude of, you know, it was destined to happen, and so, you know, what do you, mnataka nifanye nini, you know, and it goes all the way down. So that was unfortunate. But you hope, you know, you hope that something will happen.
And you're right, you mentioned, of course, the riparian land demos. Over 1,000 buildings affected in Nairobi alone. Yeah, but go ahead, Chris.
I think also, did we learn something from it in terms of disaster response? Are we capable of responding and probably saving lives? Because I'm sure if we were 100% or even 80% capable, maybe there are so many people who will not have died. In terms of building on riparian land, sometimes I have this joke. I belong to Events Managers Association of Kenya, which is an events umbrella body. And we keep saying that I think we are the only guys who can build or construct anything on riparian land. And before Sunny moves in, we guys will have demolished and taken off. So I think anybody else being given, you know, a license or authorized to build on that land, then the person actually who did that should be the guy we look for most. Absolutely. Before you even go to this guy who already constructed.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and it really dampens investor confidence, you know, when it comes to situations like that.
Let me tell you, the Solai Dam brings to fore how faulty our systems may be and how they discriminate against the poor. Because when I saw the number of lives lost, the first thing I thought was these characters are going to be in jail before we even have any explanation. They should be in the police cell. Lives were lost. But I think very candid, honest, visionary leaders like Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., who made a report that was so damning, who said we will neither be bought nor sold, who said, listen, I cannot come here and just play with this report for the sake of money because you're following me, giving me all these words of cash. What's the other silver lining? The other silver lining is that now we have a disaster management bill, courtesy of Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. and Senator Sakaja, which we had not had for so long, but which also speaks to the other, you know, Fort Tanan accident that killed so many people. Over 50 people. And yet to date, when you use that road, the road is not marked. To date, as I speak here. That road is still not marked. You drive there in the night, there is a chance you're going to topple over and just drive right down the hill. So here we are. The riparian issue also helped us understand that also there gets to a point where impunity can actually be dealt with decisively. But as we deal with the owners of the buildings, I also pray and want us to go and get that city hall officer who approved, that NEMA officer, whether it's a clerk. at the very basic levels of approvals that led to these things, because they were paid. Who? So tell the owner to tell you who other people allowed you to do this. How much did you pay them? So that then it doesn't look like it is a loss for one person and not for the other. It's a whole web and a system. You need to uproot it from its very roots. And as you do that, you need to do it impartially so that it doesn't matter whether it's Chris's or it's mine.
On matter safety, road safety, there are two things that come to mind. I'll start with the school buses. Very nice. They are now brightly, yellow. But have you ever thought that they don't have safety belts?
Yeah.
And that our kids are in these buses, but there are zero safety belts? Number two, I am driving. I am belted up, but my wife is seated here holding the baby. She's not belted up, including whoever I'm carrying. So personal responsibility also comes in. What are we doing as ourselves?
All right, and we have to wrap it up here, but Kelly, really quickly
I think on the Fort Tanan, 50 people, I remember when it happened, I tweeted and made a comparison and said Westgate was 77 people. And we've had plane crashes, maybe 2-3 people dying, and the reaction is very different. If I'm in my chopper and I crash, even if I don't die, there's an investigation, there's a report, things change. So for me, I wondered what has become of us as a nation that 50 people die, and all we say is that the driver was 72 years old. That's what we fixated on as a nation. And it tells me, like my co-panelists have said, ultimately it comes to the authorities that are responsible for setting up but also maintaining these systems.
Absolutely, and being careful not to be callous when it comes to such tragic events.
Even as I wish our viewers a wonderful Christmas and festive season, it's incumbent upon Kenyans to understand that there's just so much the government can do. I remember Obama campaigning in America, trying to inspire a country that lacked inspiration or hope, told them, there's the bit that I'm going to do, but then there's what you have to do. I will not come to your sitting room to switch off the television so that your children can study. You have to do it on your own. And so Kenyans must learn that on their own, they have to be law-abiding, that these laws were not created only to enrich the police, but also to protect them. And when they reason like that, they're going to be better people, so that when they are building, they're going to confirm, am I in the right place, as opposed to buying off the system so that they can end up with their structure. They will lose it. If they are in their cars, they must ask themselves, am I safe? Foremost, before the police hounds me down and asks for whatever amount you accuse them of asking, am I safe? And even when the kids are going to sit examinations. So we cannot have a country whose parents are the ones saying we have to buy exams for our kids and bringing up a generation of young people who are dishonest. Attitude is what we fixed a bit in 2018. We need to have it a lot more refined for 2019.
Thank you so much, Kelly, Chris, and David, for your insights. I wish we could cover a bit more. A lot happened this year, clearly. But we don't want to bring, of course, a lot of the ills that happened in 2018 into 2019. That does it for Citizen Weekend. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the team as well, behind the scenes that you do not see, who helped make this a success. I'll see you again tomorrow on Sunday Live. Have a lovely evening.